talk for about Battalion Chief Richard Ray from the city of Durham, instructor for several years here at Fire Rescue, one of the smartest people I know, and what ices the cake is he's just a nice guy too. So it's been killing me. We needed to get started because we've been sitting up here talking about stuff that just fires me up, right. and I want to keep going. So now we're going to have to recap on this one before we get back to the other one. Is that okay?
All right.
So we got talking up here before cameras were rolling. We got to talking about EV calls and fire blankets and things. So now you're telling us that you had a call. We're going to kind of back up a little bit. Is that okay?
So
you had a call. So start from there.
So my battalion, they responded to the buses, shoot, I can't call the name of it. Anyway, the buses that drive around. Transit buses. Right. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Anyway, it was dispatched as a vehicle fire. They get there, and this bus is burning on the top, and obviously it's the battery packs and that kind of stuff. And so, it upgraded the response, and we actually, I would argue it was a close call. During the suppression efforts, one of the engine companies got on an adjacent bus and was trying to extinguish it. And when it did, one of the batteries just kind of it blew a flame out the opposite side, right? And it was if it'd been on the side that they were on, they probably would have been injured. But thankfully it didn't. So we kind of regrouped. Did some stuff with the aerial, just kind of draining some water down. We finally got it kind of down and suppressed.
Because it was in between a couple of other parked buses.
That's right. It was in between other parked buses. And so one of the first things we did was they got it unplugged because it was plugged in. And then to make matters worse, like it always is, the hydrants in the area were just inadequate, right? So we ended up having to do like a rural water shuttle.
Wow.
In the city limits.
Right.
And so anyway, it worked out. And then we also have blankets, the EV blankets. That's the big thing now. And we actually used ropes. They used the aerial and that kind of stuff. And we laid the blanket over top of the battery packs and stuff on the bus. And that really helped us. And we, of course, we did the cooling thing and all that kind of stuff. And that was information about the explosion.
Which is where this conversation, for those that just joining us online, before we got started, that's where the conversation started, as we were talking about UL's information coming out about being cautious and careful with the use of the fire blankets.
That's right. And like you said, if you have the blankets, don't get rid of them, right? I mean, they do have other uses. Specifically, again, my shift, we units were out. It was a busy day. One of our squad trucks, which is non-suppression, it's more of a first responder truck. They responded to a report of a vehicle fire right around the corner from the station in a parking lot, and this car is burning, and they have the blankets, so they deployed the blanket over a vehicle fire. It wasn't an EV vehicle. It was just fire. It was a fire burning in between two cars, and they did it to protect the two cars sitting on each side of it.
Sure.
Which, I mean, that was
exposure protection.
Right.
That's great.
Heads up firefighting,
Absolutely.
So
know when you got a tool, applying it, maybe not in traditional use, but know what this tool will do.
That's exactly right.
One of the deals where we got to do something.
That's right. That's right. So it really worked out, and it was really neat. I hate I wasn't on the EV call, but there's some lessons learned, and one of the things that I'll tell you is that my hazmat captain, the way the call come out, it just come out as a vehicle fire, and then units kind of added themselves once we got when the information finally come out. Okay, this is an electric vehicle fire, that kind of stuff. The hazmat added, and my hazmat captain, he's got some good information on the on this fire, and specifically with the bus manufacturer and that kind of stuff. Because I mean, they were telling us, look, man, as much as 18 to 24 hours after the fact, this thing can still light off.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So some of the things that we did, though, was, obviously we removed all the other buses around it, right? Try and eliminate it. It was in a parking lot by itself. To be honest, it really worked out nicely that it wasn't other vehicles around and that.
Or on its route in the middle of town or something.
And so it was isolated, because the big concern, these EV fires, right? Electric vehicles, they're supposed to be better for the environment, right up until they catch on fire.
You're right. Don't get me started. Right. Sure.
So it was just, we were fortunate because, again, it wasn't downtown Durham. It wasn't, it was sitting off in a parking lot at the data terminal where it's supposed to, and where they work on them and all that kind of stuff. And it was just thankful that it was there. Now, we did have some issues with water supply. The hydrants were not what we felt like were adequate, and I think they determined that there'd been some work done in the area previously, and just a valve didn't get.
But you were flowing a lot of water, deluging, cooling, or whatever.
Trying to cool it. That's right. So some lessons learned from it was like truck placement. Our truck placement could have been better, and the big thing was monitoring the runoff, monitoring the air. Just because there's so many unknowns right now. There's a lot that's known about it, but there's a whole lot of unknown too. So, it's and they're going to become more and more. And like we were talking earlier, my concern is like if it happens in, we have a lot of buildings in downtown Durham where the parking deck is under the building, right?
Yep.
And of course that's where they put the chargers and all that kind of stuff. And so now what happens when, access
that happens down there?
That's right, because now you're dealing with a building. Getting the occupants out, and you really start to tax resources, and even though we're 120 on a shift, something like that. I mean, it's going to take everybody to get it done, and so then you take and apply that same principle to some of these smaller municipalities, right? What are
you going to do?
Right, you got to get in on the front end of some stuff. So, still a lot to be learned there, and it was. I was thankful that incident played out the way it did. Unfortunately, I wasn't there. I wish I could have been there. But just the fact that all that we gained from it, what we learned from it, and the big thing about it is that, it's one of those things that's good information that's getting across the organization and trying to let people know, hey, this is what we dealt with, this is what we had, this is how we mitigated it, and it wasn't perfect, and we were as much lucky on some stuff as we were good on some stuff.
The importance of you telling that story, though, is for all of us, we're kind of learning our way through this thing because nobody's really got a great answer to this.
That's right.
And so we went to a major manufacturer that happens to be in this state that I will not mention a name, and we were talking to engineers, and we said, we need some help with this. And their answer was, let it burn, push it off the road. And I said, well, that's pretty cool if you're way out in the middle of nowhere on the interstate.
Right.
I can push it off and maybe get away with it. But what if it's in that basement?
That's right.
What if it's in that sub-level? What if it's got an exposure problem? I can't push this thing anywhere. What am I going to do? And they said, push it off and let it burn. That was the only answer that the person building this vehicle, that designed this vehicle, had for us.
Right.
And that's not an answer.
It's not an answer, and it's not an answer, especially when you start dealing with the toxicity getting up into the buildings and the air returns. I mean, because now look at the monitoring that you're going to have to do. It's just, I understand the principle behind it, but it leaves a lot to be desired.
We have not solved, we have not cracked, and the vast majority of departments in this state aren't ready for it, I don't think.
No,
we're learning on the fly here.
No, and I can tell you, even my volunteer department, we're not ready for it. And I mean, and it's coming. I mean, it's absolutely coming because it seems to be a wave right now. And so, it's one of those things that I'm glad that we have people like FSRI that's on the front end of it doing the studies and that kind of stuff. And and it's not just vehicles though. When you start looking at the scooters and you start looking at all the things that we plug in, I mean, like, I'm scared to death to charge my DeWalt battery on my drill because I dropped it one time and I was afraid I don't want it to do thermal runaway.
I leave mine in one of my sheds outside away from the house because I don't bring it in the house to charge it because I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, that's right. So anyway, it's cool stuff, right? I mean, that FSRI is trying to get ahead of the curve on this, and I think FSRI is a resource that every organization, large, medium, small, needs to be looking at because they're going to put things in terms that firefighters understand it, and they are the cutting edge on the research front, and it's.
So let's go down that pathway a little bit then, because this is another conversation we were having earlier. You do a lot of work with that organization and with that group. Explain the group for those that may or may not be familiar with the acronym, what it is, and let's talk a little bit about your involvement with them.
Sure. So it's Underwriters Laboratory. It's their Fire Safety Research Institute, and it's one of those. They've done a lot of work through the years. They did the stream study. They've done ventilation. They've done coordinated fire attack. They've done a search study. They're doing multifamily dwellings now. They've done fire behaviors. They've done basement fires. They've done attic fires. I mean, the work that they've done is tremendous. I mean, I don't think a lot of the firefighters in the service recognize just how much information is out there from them. And you know, when they first come out, there was a huge piece about, well, you know, they're in a lab, right? They're in a lab. Well, even though the street is not a lab, they were able to replicate some things and do some things over and over again that really firmed up and gave a solid foundation on some of this information that they've put out. Specifically, like one of the things that I found was interesting was when I was involved with the search study, they were talking about water usage and how much water we're actually using on the fire ground. And so that led me into a little more research. So I got to looking at the coordinated fire attack study. And so I'm in there and I'm looking at it and I'm reading, and it's like they did a fire start to finish, 469 gallons.
Okay. Yep.
I don't know many fire departments that don't have.
Pull that off, right.
Yeah, they've got, you know.
Absolutely.
There's water there, right?
Looking around in here, right.
That's right. So it's like, how did that, and then you dig in deeper and you come to find out that just from a fire attack perspective, you know, if you position the nozzle in the right place, right, if you can get good water on the fire, we're not using as much water as we think we are. And just little tidbits of information like that. And then, you know, you go and look at the ventilation study where, you know, the importance of talking about coordinated ventilation, and, you know, they don't say a tactic is bad. They'll research a tactic and they'll give you the pros and cons. Here's the information. You apply it to your department. And one of the things that I really like about all the work that FSRI does is it's free.
Yeah.
It's free. If
you got to invest the time to look,
that's
read,
right.
and study, and that's it.
Yeah, and they have this thing called an online academy where, I mean, that's where all their work is. And there's videos and there's people that they've interviewed that were tech panel members that give you insight. And for any size fire department, if they're looking to develop an SOG or you know, what tactic do they need for whatever kind of fire, that's a good place to go and start. And then just the whole training piece that comes along with it. So those folks are doing a lot of good work for us. You know, and it's I shouldn't be a part of it, right? I don't feel like I'm worth it. So I'll tell you that that leads me to one thing that, you know, there's you hear a lot in the fire service where firefighters don't feel like they can contribute because they're not coming from a large department, right? Well, what I can tell you about FSRI is when I got on the search study, I kid you not, I was sitting at the fire station one night. It was 10:30. I was just cruising through Facebook, getting ready to go to sleep, and I saw where application deadline for the search study is at midnight tonight. Mm-hmm. And I'm like,
why not?
Why not?
Worst they can tell me is no.
That's exactly right. So I had applied for some studies before and had used my career background, right? In terms of my department, that kind of stuff. And I said, you know what, for this I'm going to do a little bit different because there's some challenges that we have with search in the volunteer fire service. Man, that's exactly what they wanted. And I couldn't tell you what I wrote.
Yeah.
But they were super excited to have me, and part of the reason why they picked me was because I was from the volunteer service, and that's an important aspect of their work. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that it doesn't matter what size fire department you come from, you can make an impact in the fire service. And the thing about FSRI is that they get input from all size fire departments. They look at the fire service as a whole, not just as one, you know, you got career departments, this is the entire fire service, right? And it was really humbling to be a part of it, to be honest with you. But it was very eye-opening for me. What I learned is just, we don't have enough time, but it just, the information and the networking and like I said, you know, for anybody out there listening, I would really encourage you to get on FSRI's website, check out their online academy. They got a lot of information out there, especially on the EV stuff, a lot of information about battery fires, that kind of stuff, in addition to all the structure fire, ventilation, fire attack, all that kind of stuff.
And you said you're involved with the upcoming one that I think you said kicked off like in September or something. So tell us a little bit about what's coming.
All right. So I was fortunate enough to be a rollover from. Generally, you can only participate in one study.
Okay.
So I was fortunate enough that I was a rollover from. Because what they do is they roll certain ones over from one study to the next to provide some continuity and to kind of give examples, and so that the newer tech panel members can. It's kind of like
understand the flow of the thing, the process, and everything.
And so it was really cool to be selected for that, because it's multifamily dwelling stuff, and it's talking about tactics in multifamily dwellings and how do we deal with it, and it was it's really cool to be a part of it. That started in September of last year, right before Hurricane Helene come through and did its thing.
Right.
And there's been some work done, but we're in the early stages of that.
Where do you end up going to do most of your work? Because obviously there's got to be some data collecting, some work going on. So where do you have to travel or go to do most of it?
So right now they're using the training grounds at Delco County, which is just outside of Philly. And they have a portion of the training grounds where, they've built structures. They've built, for the basement fires. For the search study, we had 2 ranch-style houses, identical, that were built right there. And we'd burn in one day, burn in the other one the next day. And they would come back in after the fire's over. I don't think people realize, too, I didn't, how hard those folks at FSRI works, because after they do a burn, right, and we're doing the burn, they get all the data that they want from it. Now it's time to tear it out, and what they do is they tear everything out, put it right back in, just like it would be if it was in a house. Carpet, paint, sheetrock, and replace the shingles if the shingles get damaged, and so that continuity in the buildings and
they're taking that variable out of the equation.
Right, and the work that they're doing. You got to think, after a fire, they're going in and tearing that stuff out and trying to get it ready for. They do contract some work out for the remodel, but they're tearing stuff out, and to see the pride and enthusiasm that they have for it it's nothing short of inspiring, right? It's you can tell that they love what they do. It's a lot of work, right? We're not going to take that away from them at all, but it's just to see them smiling and having a good time, and then like I said, right, they're also, their purpose is to keep things the same, so that when they're collecting data, they're taking the variables away, right? And so it's really neat, and again, check them out. They're on all the social media stuff, right? But definitely go on the website too. But yeah, their office is actually in it's in Maryland, and I'm trying to remember exactly where it is.
Yeah, Maryland.
Ken and Craig, forgive me for that. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, I had, when we did the search study, that was where we actually went to their office, and they even have a lab there where they do some smaller work. And it's just you don't really realize just how much they're involved in until you're around them and you're chatting with them and that kind of stuff. And so yeah, it's really cool.
It's a smart crowd of folks, because the ones that I've heard present, a lot of the ones names that we all know are smart people, and it's just kind of fun to be around and listen.
It is, because you can just sit there in a conversation and you're just picking stuff up.
Absolutely.
And it's like, wow, man,
Absolutely.
it's I didn't think about it that way.
And it's the thinking firefighter. It ain't got anything to do with your career.
That's right.
Paid or no paid. It has nothing to do with it. The thinking firefighter can listen to some of that and then figure out, say, okay, back home, how do I apply this?
That's right.
How do I take this back, and what does this mean to me? And how does this change what I do, or how does this make me better at what I do?
That's right.
And it has nothing to do with where you come from.
Well, and you talk about where you come from, and you mentioned early in the discussion that when people don't come from large departments, big name departments, there's a feeling to kind of sit back,
Right.
like yeah, y'all boys are out there fighting the big stuff, we're just doing single-family dwellings. Well, that's what the big guys are doing too, but nobody really talks about that. But my point is, when you bring things back and you're a smaller department, you can change it. You can make those changes and try things out. A large department can't. And we talked about it yesterday in the round table.
Sure.
And he said turning the battleship in a bathtub.
Yep.
Right.
I'm in a John boat, so I can flip that thing around pretty quick.
Yeah, when we're in a smaller department and we have these different ideas that we want to try out, we have that opportunity. We can change a complete department in 3 days.
That's right.
And so I think that we overlook the value of that, and how more agile we can be.
Absolutely.
So the smaller departments are the Marines.
Yeah.
The big departments, they're the Army.
Right.
Right.
You know, yeah, there may be something going on, but the Army won't be there for 6 months.
Yeah.
Marines will be there fighting.
Yeah.
That was a plug for his hometown. He didn't kick that up, so there you go.
So I mean, that, well, you talk about small departments versus a larger department too. You look at the margin of error that they have on the fire ground, it's a whole lot less too. So when you start talking about changes and improving the fire ground, the smaller fire departments have a much better chance at effecting that positive change. And we all know, I mean, we're all firefighters, right? We don't like how things are right now, but we don't like change
don't
either.
want change.
So it's one of those things where, just remember you make a ripple, right? You throw a rock into a lake and there's ripples that go out. I think the same thing applies for your career in the fire service, right? How do you, be the positive change that the department needs and that the citizen demands, right? So I mean, for me, it's like, you can make that change and you do it, and then when you see the gain from it and the positive outcome, and you really see how it benefits the citizen, that's where the real win is. Mm-hmm. Because I can tell you, coming from a medium-sized department, we can't always make the change like we want to, but I can see changes in my volunteer department because we were able to impact them, right? Sure. And you were able to see the fruits of your labor a whole lot quicker than you would in a larger department. So, yeah.
Sure.
Well, and throughout my career, one of my favorite things to look back on is things that we suggested and changed, whether we worked it out in training, through trial and error, whatever, and we all come to a decision, and everybody thought it was crazy. And then 15 years later, we're still doing it because it worked.
Yeah.
But with that same thing being said, what we had was a couple ideas before them that we were agile enough to, okay, that didn't work, we'll try it like this and add this to it.
Right.
When you're talking those big organizations, you can't do that.
Yeah,
No.
absolutely.
So, yeah.
You also are so kind to come to Fire Rescue here at Myrtle Beach and teach programs for us. You did that again. You had a class this morning.
Yes, sir, I did. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it. What were you doing this morning?
So my class this morning was titled Tactics, Tips, Thoughts on it. No, it was...
Did somebody else name it?
I can't remember it.
We threw him a curve. So he would come in here prepared to talk about this, and we started talking about if it's all right, and we threw him a curveball.
You did. Small departments winning big on the fire ground.
There you go.
Tips for winning big on the fire ground. So the mindset of that class was, one, when you look at the state of South Carolina and you look at the departments that are going to be sending folks to attend, you try and you want your class to be impactful for them and where they can they can feel like there's application there, right? And so in coming up with that class, I'm like, what are the things that I've seen over the years on the fire ground that I wish somebody had told me, right? And it's simple things, right? I mean, I didn't talk about anything today that was earth-shattering, that was new. It was probably more of a reminder of the basics, right? Like, what's the first? We talk about incident priorities and life safety being the main one. Well, what's your first action on the fire ground? Well, what's the one that's going to save the most lives? Little things like just getting that mind to thinking about that, and then how do you, we talked about coordinate the fire ground when you don't have the staffing. How do you all right, now how do you determine which tactic am I going to do, right? So let's take search, for instance, right? All right, so you pull up on a fire, you get a report that somebody's inside.
Yep.
It's just you and one other person.
Yeah, what you gonna do?
What you gonna do, right? How can you make a difference? Well, if there's fire showing from a window, that's kind of an easy one, right? Put the the line in the window.
Yep.
And I know that some people are like, well, we don't do that. Well, we've been throwing water from the outside to the inside since Ben Franklin was a fire chief, right? So it's a tactic that works. You just got to put it in the right context.
No different than that EV blanket we were talking about.
Yep.
It's no different than talking about these studies. I want to create and I want to have smart people
That's right.
that can apply everything you got in your toolbox, not just rote memorization of the way
Right.
we train one scenario on a fire ground and just
Yep.
repeat that thing 1,000 times.
Right.
I want you to be able to be thinking enough to know, look, there ain't but two of us.
That's right.
The next one ain't going to get here for another 3 or 4 minutes. What am I going to do right now with what
Right.
I got? And if I got to squirt water in a window from 20 foot back, I don't care. Do
Right.
it, you know.
Well, think about what does the homeowner want you to do, right?
Do something to make this better.
Right. And that was the premise of the whole class, was that every action that you take on the fire ground should go to make the fire ground better. From start to finish. It doesn't salvage and overhaul, right? What are you doing in salvage and overhaul that's making a difference? You can't tell me that people's possessions don't mean something to them.
Sure.
And then you throw in the fact, well, what about those who don't have homeowners insurance, right? That everything they've got is in that house.
Yep. Right.
Your salvage matters.
Yeah.
You know, how you treat your customer matters. And so again, what are you doing to make it better?
Putting that fire out from any tactic, any safe, feasible, possible matter has got to be making this thing better. And I don't get hung up to things written on ball caps or
Right.
T-shirts. I want to be able to effect change in a positive, fast, safe way.
That's exactly right. And, you know, I mean, again, it's, you know, everybody wants to get on this whole aggressive kick. Well, to me, aggression and aggressiveness, those are not tactics, right? Like, you know, you talk about offensive versus defensive fire attack, right? That's inside versus outside. But I can be aggressive in both styles. My aggression and how I address that on the fire ground, that's aggressiveness,
Sure.
right? And you can be aggressive even if you have. Sure, we all want to be inside a burning building.
Yep.
That's what we do.
Yep.
But there are times, especially in a volunteer world or a small fire department, that's not going to be your first option.
Right.
So what can you do? Well, be aggressive in your actions, which requires you to be on the front end of things, right? I mean, you've got to put the work and the time in to know the job, to study it. You know, I believe you got to be a student of the game, start to finish. And when you hit a time frame where you think we've heard it all, where you know it all, you need to quit. Well, that's a lot of truth in that.
Right.
But if you're gonna serve a citizen, and you've got a true servant's heart, you want to know as much as you can to help them, right? And I don't think that, there's some tactics that we know that works. There's some stuff that we know that doesn't work. That's fine. You stay away from the stuff that doesn't work, but the stuff that's in that gray area, right? Sometimes those are the outside of the box tools that you need to address the incident. And you just have to remain a student of the game. You know, my son, he's a fourth generation firefighter, and he's coming up into service, and I tell you, I'm super proud of that. But the thing I try and tell him is that, man, you got to learn every day about the job. You've got to invest in yourself. And what's unfortunate is that one of the things I taught him early on was something that I learned in a fire station.
Okay.
I told him, I said, your knowledge, your training, your skill set, you've got to actively invest in that yourself. And because I come through a time in the fire service where I worked for some officers and been around some people that they didn't want to get out on the bay floor and train during the day. So who had to do it? I had to do it. I had to have the discipline to invest in myself. Sure. In order to be better. Sure. And it's not just about it's not about me being better to a degree, but it's about being better for the citizen, right? You're gonna be better if you're investing for that citizen, because really that's who's counting on you. That's who's counting on you.
It's an S scale. We're running out of time, but it don't matter because I told you this is going to go great. It's an S scale. One end of it is stupid, one end of it's smart. When you're sliding up and down that scale, the closer you can get to that S smart on that scale, the more you can apply that gray scale that
That's
you're
right.
talking
That's
about
right.
in better ways.
That's right.
I can take better advantage of the scale that you're talking about, of that gray area, if I'm sliding up on that smart, stupid
Yep.
scale.
Well,
And
I
so
think we're all
that's what I
looking for
want.
thinking firefighters, right?
Right.
Yep.
We don't want somebody programmed that every fire they go to, it's rinse and repeat. I
Right.
do the same thing no matter what I see.
It's that aggressive
The small-
mentality. I'm just
the-
going to be brr, I'm just going to go. You know,
and there's a time for that,
Sure.
and there's a time for not for that, and there's a time for a tactic that I have to perform to get to that.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Right.
but what I love about your program, and it's something I talk about a lot, is you go to these classes that are provided by, NFA or the academy, and when you're doing these scenarios, you've got more resources you know what to do with.
Yep.
When you're figuring these things out and you're doing strategies and tactics, I got 4 apparatus parked and staging.
Right.
I don't have that.
Right.
So what I'm faced with, and what your program talks about, and what you talk about a lot, is I may have 5 critical factors on scene when I get there. I can handle 2 of them.
Right. That's right.
Which 2 do I pick? And so if I'm not a thinking firefighter and I only know rinse and repeat, I'm bogged in the mud.
Yep.
Right. That's exactly right. Exactly right.
I'm just mad at you for making me be in here this morning and studying his class. But what I have heard said is I might not have got in there anyway because you had a full room.
Yeah.
I might not even have gotten the door anyway, but that's okay. Will you come back and just do it for me and him?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
So yeah, it's the fire service is it's greater than all of us, right? It's not about any of us sitting here. It's about the greater good of a service that serves humanity. And like I told him this morning, it's not about me. It's not about me. Anything, I've been blessed to come here and share. I've been blessed to go other places and share, and I've been able to do some really what I think is cool stuff and be involved in the service at a national level. But it's not about me. It's not. It's about how do we collectively make the service better and leave it better for people like my son who's coming up in it, right? That's what I'm thinking about. How do I leave it better for him? But also too is that how do you leave it better for the citizens that you're serving, right? And so it's I'll tell you, it's been a quick 33 years for me.
Yeah, we were talking about that too. Yes, sir.
It goes by in a hurry,
Yes,
but
sir.
I'll also tell you that I wouldn't want to do anything else.
If I had a chance, I'd do it again.
Yep,
Golly,
exactly.
If
I
it
would
be
too.
Any way of just kind of halfway knowing what I know now,
Right.
it's been able to start over because
Yeah.
I miss some of those times, man, and I didn't appreciate it at the moment.
Right, that's right. That's right. And so even when I was younger and I was first starting to go to FDIC, that was one of the conferences I always went to because I didn't know about at the time. I didn't know about all these conferences that are going on, and I know that through the years there's been a whole lot more. But
Right.
Well, it's the only one you saw in the magazine.
it was exactly
so
right.
that's the only communication we had. We didn't have internet.
Right.
So the hard part for me was I would go and sit in these classes and have no idea who I'm listening to.
Right.
And I trying to be a sponge, but you walk past them in the hall and you don't stop them and talk to them, right?
Yeah.
And really and get to know them a little bit, but pick their brain and so that's one of the things that I missed out on early on in my careers because I wouldn't step out there, and,
Yeah, but now full circle, he's on the advisory group for FDIC.
Yeah,
So
but as
go.
a young firefighter, you'll see it here too.
yeah.
They don't think they can come up to you and ask questions.
Right, that's right, that's right.
When you have somebody that does speak nationally,
Right.
I'm only a firefighter, or my department's only this.
Right.
So you don't know how open and how similar these guys, no matter where
That's
they're from,
exactly right.
that they're all firefighters. I mean,
right.
I'm just like you.
That's right. It's funny. I told my son too. One of the things I told him, I said, "Look, you're going to be around some different fire departments, and you're going to find that the problems are largely the same.
Absolutely.
It's just that the clowns have different faces."
Yep, same circus, same circus,
Yes,
different
sir.
clowns.
So
sir.
it's like I said, but getting back, one of the things that I said in my class today was like, look, the only way we can make the service better, right, is to share knowledge, right? And there's a lot of firefighters that step out of the service and retire and walk away from it, and they never share their stories. They never share the instance. And so we totally miss out on that. And so one of the things I told people in my class, I'm like, look, if you want the copy of the presentation, just email me. I'll share it with you. Because what good does it do to me to hoard it, right? If I'm not sharing it so that everybody, that another firefighter can get better, shame on me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shame on me.
Absolutely.
And so, I told him, I said, might be a little slow on the response on the email, but just hit me up again. Hit me up again if I don't get you in time. But and I think that's important, right? I mean, like, I look at my dad. My dad this year's got 60 years in the service, right?
Wow. All right.
This year marks 82 years that my family served on the Creedmoor Fire Department. And, now that my son and my nephew are also on there, so it's a legacy thing, right? And family's a big thing in the fire service. But, my dad, man, some of the stuff that he's seen over 60 years has been, I mean,
Can't imagine. The changes even.
Right, man,
Right.
because he come through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s, right? So just thinking about what he has seen in his career, right, and he's probably forgotten more than I will ever know.
Wow.
And he also, but they weren't old school, right? I mean, like, he's talked about times where, they had to protect exposures. They only had 500 gallons of water, right?
Sure.
And a booster line was really all they had. So they had to protect it somehow. You couldn't get water or whatever. So just to talk with him and then see how the fire service has evolved and this continues to evolve, and looking at the technology that, that's out there. I told some guys on Creedmoor one night, we were talking up there in the meeting. I said, look, man, y'all, people that are coming in the service now are really in an exciting time, right? Because think about it. You've got FSRI. You've got a lot.
That's what we were just talking about before yours.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
You got all this stuff that's at your fingertips now to help you be a firefighter. And how quick is it? Well, just hand me that phone right there.
Boop, boop, boop. There it is.
There it is. And so it's really an exciting time for the younger generation, and it's as we've grown in the service, right? We come up through it. There's stuff that we saw that that people that are coming into service now never get to see, right? And it's just how things evolve. But it's man, what an exciting time to be in the fire service.
Your dad saw things, but I can't imagine when he looks at you now and your involvement with whether it's UL or FDIC or teaching wherever, how he looks on you, and can only imagine what that will be like for your son.
Oh yeah, I if you got time for a quick story, I'll tell you a quick story. So,
well, I told you we'd keep him all day.
Right.
So we're over time now. We're killing Brad. He's happy.
So we talk about exposure to people, right?
Yep.
So there's a guy by the name. He's from Wichita. His name's Sammy Hiddle, right? He's a truck guy.
Right.
Really good with forcible entry. I mean, just a wealth of knowledge, right? So I had the opportunity to have a dinner with him one night. I mean, just.
Sure.
Wow, I'm sitting.
Yep.
I'm sitting beside Sammy Hiddle, right? And so we're talking, and it's just like we're talking right here, right? I mean, he's as down to earth guy as you will ever meet. So I was just sharing with him that, my son's going to be at FDIC this year. That he's, volunteering and that kind of stuff, and then for my son to be exposed to Sammy in that class, right? I mean, and some of the instructors. At 19 years old, my son is being exposed to stuff that took me 10 and 15 years to get, right? And so you to that point,
how great,
to that point, you're right. I mean, like, what if I'd have had that opportunity, right? Would it have made a difference? I don't know, but I also believe that I come through a time in the fire service when God wanted me in the fire service.
Sure, absolutely.
That's
absolutely purposeful, absolutely.
So it's kind of. It's just really cool, man. It's cool to see. It's cool to see how the service has evolved, and I do like talking to the older firefighters, right, and getting their take on how things were.
Sure.
Because when you look at a truck like PD Hose Company right here, right, I mean, like, it's that's what I remember, right? And of course, ours wasn't open cabs, but the body and stuff.
Right.
That's what I grew up watching my dad do, and so it's pretty cool, and. I'll tell you that never in a million years would I have ever thought that I would have accomplished what I have in the fire service. It's just humbling to to be able to share, you know, and be able to have friendships with you guys and be able to see y'all and talk to y'all and network, and it's really just it's incredible. It really is.
I've been lucky enough to watch your rise through the years of people being interested in bringing you in to talk, you know, and I've seen that happen to other guys. And what I really appreciate about you is you never let them asking you to come in get bigger than the message.
Yeah.
You know, it was never about Richard Ray coming in. It was about the message you brought with you.
That's right.
But and you'll see it. You see it at FDIC. You see all these guys that are creating programs and flashy names and all these things just to get out there. You've always just brought the message.
Right.
You know, it's never about Richard Ray. Like it or don't like it, this is what I got. This is my message.
Yeah.
This is the passion I'm going to bring. And to me, I appreciate that way more out of somebody teaching than anybody else.
That's why I appreciate having him here.
I always do.
Why we want him back at this program, because there's a genuineness to you.
Well, I appreciate that.
We appreciate what you do. You're great at it.
Well, thank you.
I don't tell it to your face because I've said it behind your back, but you're good at what you do, and we appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, you do wonder from time to time, right? Like, you know, if your message is getting across and how you're being received, right? Because you don't always know, right? And that's one of the things, too, that I told my son. I said, you know, you're coming up in a service, and I said, you're going to touch people and never realize it.
Sure.
And I said, there's you know, you just always have that servant's heart, and you'll do just fine.
You'll do it.
And but you're right. You don't really realize the who you touch and that kind of stuff. And I'll tell you, I taught a class this year at FDIC. It's one I'm actually teaching tomorrow. And it's the volunteer fire. It's commanding and controlling the volunteer fire ground. Man, they closed my classroom down because it was full.
Oh yeah, right.
And never had that happen before at FDIC.
It's a humbling experience.
It is very humbling that somebody wants to come listen to Richard Ray from Creedmoor, North Carolina, right? So you know, it's just been incredible for me. It really has. And let me be clear about something too. And my wife, she would shy away from this, and she'd downplay it. But you know, obviously, if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't. You know,
Thank you. Yes, sir.
That's where it starts,
Thank
right?
you.
And it's not about what I've done; it's about Christ being in me.
Thank you.
But I couldn't do it without the support from my wife and my kids.
Absolutely.
You know it. Don't you know it?
I couldn't do it. Like she's down here with me this week.
Yeah.
I'm glad that y'all have moved it back a week because it allows her to get out of school so she can come with me. But you know,
Well, you've had your son down here before.
I've had him down here
Yes, you
before
have.
too. Yep. So you know, it's been really to be able to have that support at home.
Yes, sir.
You don't really realize it. I just don't think some firefighters recognize the support that you get away from the service that helps you in the service, right?
Right.
And it's our job to teach them.
That's right.
It's our job to remind them. And I tell my young guys, or not necessarily young guys, that while you're here hanging with the boys having a great time, your wife is at home or your significant other is at home taking everybody to ball practice, getting homework done, getting everything done. And then for people like us that are either involved in this association or you as much as you teach, you're going for 3 or 4 days at a time, and somebody's holding down the damn fort.
So I'll share this with you. So I'll tell you that my whole teaching experience, right, I think it's a pretty unique story. When I started out as an instructor, I wasn't even going to get my instructor. But I had a buddy that I went to the academy with, and we were working together out of Station 2, and he said, hey, man, he said, let's get our instructor. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. And he's like, no, let's get it. You know, we can teach certification classes and make some money part-time.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. Okay. So I get into the class, and we go through the class, it's fine. But as I start to teach certification classes, it starts to really become my why. And my why was that in order for me to teach, I would have to know as much about the subject.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Because a student is going to challenge you.
Yes, sir.
They're going to take you to task. And so my thing was that, okay, I don't want to get in a jam. I want to be able to go home to my wife and kids after every shift, after every call on the volunteer side. So how do I do that? Well, let's go and be an instructor. And I had no idea that just the desire to want to know more about the job so that I could go home and be with my family, which, by the way, they sacrificed a ton for me,
Sure.
Has gotten me to some of the places I've been able to go. And it's really been a fun ride. But I can tell you, man, FDIC, FSRI, if you'd have told me that when I was a young firefighter in Creedmoor and Durham that I was going to be doing that later in my career, I'd have looked at you and laughed you out the door, friend. You know, and it's so it's you know, it's cool. It's been a good experience, and you know, I'm just fortunate. I've got a lot of good people in my corner, and like I said, when you start thinking about your family and that kind of stuff, that was really what propelled me to teach, was that just so I would know, so I could go home.
Absolutely.
And you know, they sacrifice, right? I mean, like, there's things that I missed with my kids that I hate I missed, and I'll tell you, you know, you don't really think about it, but you really don't have but about 18 summers with your kids.
That's it, sir.
And
sir.
you know, that's been a realization for me here recently.
He's feeling it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's over before you know it.
And you know, like, you know, my daughter, she works at Duke Clinic. She's in the apheresis clinic at Duke Hospital. I mean, she's making money. It took me 20 plus years to make. Good for her, right? But, you know, she's a nurse at Duke, and my son, he's in UNC Charlotte in the fire and safety technology program, and he wants to be a firefighter, right? And you see all that, and you're like,
Well, both of them can be successful.
right? That's true. You know, you're thinking, wow, that's I'm proud of them. But then you look back at, like, man, there was some stuff that I missed that I wish I hadn't missed.
Right.
You know.
Well, and you don't get back time.
No, that's one thing that you don't get back, and so you have to make the most of it while you go through. And I'll tell you, when they were older, you know, I'm thankful I was able to make most of my daughter's soccer games, and I never missed many of my son's wrestling matches. And truthfully, it was because of the position I had at work. It allowed me some freedom and some ability to be able to do that.
Right.
And you know, and so all I say is that, you know, be sure you thank your loved ones for the sacrifices they make, because you don't see some of the sacrifices that they have to make. And it's not easy, and it's a challenge, but, you know, when you get to the point of retirement, right? I mean, you've got to be able to reflect back and, like, you know, yeah, I did make a difference, right? I mean, and please understand, you don't have to teach at a conference. You don't have to teach on or write an article or write a book or be on a podcast. You don't have to do that to make a difference. You can do it on the bay floor of your fire station.
Absolutely.
That's where you make the difference, right? And then just make the difference by being humble and kind, right? You know, I mean, it's I don't think it's very hard, but sometimes it is for some people. And you know, I know firefighters, they don't have an ego. They're not arrogant or anything like that. I know, you don't ever see that in the fire service, but you know, there does come a time when you have to reflect, and you've got to you take inventory of through your years, and, you know, there's a whole lot of people I got to thank.
Absolutely.
You know, and it starts with the family. So, yeah.
Well, we appreciate
Thank
all
you so
do.
much. I appreciate
You're
that.
a great guy.
Appreciate it.
Great instructor and a friend. So we appreciate you
Appreciate
being
that.
here with us. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all, and
Sir.
it's always a pleasure to be down here in South Carolina for the conference.
Winner and an easy interview. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.